Hello, bookworms. This is Abby.
And I'm Mary.
Welcome to another episode of Eat the Bookworm, where we discuss books we're currently reading and book-related content. We should discuss the books we're currently reading, because I actually have books this time.
Okay, let me whip out my list.
So, I'll go first, because I have two books I'm reading currently. This one I have is called Life as We Knew It.
Ooh, the cover looks nice.
Yes, it's very blue, by Susan Beth Pfeffer. I'm actually reading this for work because, you know, you have to do professional learning during the summer as a teacher. So I'm doing one where we're learning how to implement book clubs in our classroom to get kids more engaged with reading. And so we choose a book based on a theme that we want, whatever. And this one's actually about an event that happens, like an asteroid crashes into the moon, which causes the moon to get closer to Earth.
Ooh.
So, of course, when that happens, tidal waves, earthquakes, volcanoes, all that stuff. And it's just about this girl, teenager, who's basically still trying to live a normal life through all the chaos. You know, still trying to go to school, trying to survive with her brothers, her mom.
You like a lot of those, like, end of the world ones. I kind of like that.
Yeah, well, that's why I chose this one, because the other one was about, the other one I was reading, the asteroid crashing into Earth and then people leaving the planet. But this one's more like a diary format.
Ooh.
Like, she's writing in a diary while all this is going on. It's good so far. I have to finish this part before Thursday because I need to read it by Thursday for work. So that's good. It's pretty good. Would I give this to my sixth graders? Probably not, because they mentioned sex in it. Not. It's just like come and go. But
I wouldn't mention any of my books to sixth graders.
Yeah, but, you know, as a middle school teacher, and
you have to consider stuff like that.
Well, yeah, but we all know how sixth graders are. Like, any mention of sex, they're like,
yeah, they won't take it seriously.
They won't take it seriously. And the other one I started reading just because I was interested in it, kind of piqued my interest, is called Invisible Women. Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. So basically, how everything that we come across in life, like transportation, public transportation, medicine, work, life balance, everything is defaulted to being a man. Even the seatbelts in your car.
Yeah.
So, like, without taking into consideration, you know, boobs, women's physiology and all that stuff. Yeah. I've only gotten into the part about transportation. But I'm hoping it gets, I mean, it's good. It's just a lot of information.
It's a dry read.
Yeah. It's more of like information based. A lot of research, facts. It's probably going to take me a while to finish. But that's what I'm reading.
My turn?
Yes, it's your turn.
So, picking up on the information facts. The book that I am reading on my Kindle. I have multifaceted ways of doing this. I actually bought this book because you and I had talked about it before. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Basically, it's a book about the effects of psychological trauma known as traumatic stress. The book goes into a lot about his research when he was identifying what PTSD was, because it's there's a bunch of knowledge obviously in the psychology world, but it's a relatively new science. Like, there hasn't a lot of research, and he was one of the first people to research one of the first people to do a deep dive into post-traumatic stress disorder and trying to understand it. Because at his time, or when he first started doing this, he was actually using Vietnam War vets as his research group and identifying different things that were triggering them and how their adjustment to life coming back from war was so impacted by their experiences. And he started comparing it to people who were coming out of abuse clinics and realizing how similar their bodies were reacting and like the different chemical imbalances. Like, if you look at brain scans, you can actually see differences in people's brains who have experienced trauma. So I actually really liked it. But again, it's a lot of information. So I'm having to reread sections over and over again.
Yeah.
But so far, I really liked it.
You know what I need to get in the habit of doing when I'm reading books like that is annotating and making notes. Because I don't do that just because, I don't know.
I typically highlight things that I want to go back and research, but like I kind of want something a little more in my face.
Yeah.
So the other book I was reading is Le Freak.
Oh, yeah, that one that you were reading in the airport?
Yeah, I'm still reading it. If I'm Nile Rodgers, he was actually the founder of the disco group Chic. I saw him live, and then I became obsessed with him and did all kinds of Googling about his life and watched like a bajillion documentaries. And then when I found out he had a book, I immediately bought it. And I was reading it in the airport when we were going on vacation, and I loved it. His life is so interesting, like just his perspective and like where he grew up and like how the way his parents were. And I don't want to give anything away, but it's it never ceases to amaze me how people can get over being in such desperate situations to make millions, you know, and become self-sufficient. So I really liked it. And then the last one, my nightstand read, is called The Luckiest Girl Alive. I just picked this up because I saw that they're actually making a series about it.
Wait.
I think it was a Mila Kunis.
Is it a movie?
I think it's a movie or a series on Netflix.
Because I know I've heard of that title, and I don't know who's in it.
I believe it's Mila Kunis.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So because I refuse to watch anything until I have read the book, I started reading it.
Got it.
So I haven't know anything much about it because I just started it. So
how do you like it so far?
The writing is really good, and normally I will stop reading after the first couple chapters if it's not a good. And I got past that, so
it's good.
Interesting.
Okay,
it's interesting. But those are our books for this episode.
Okay, so in this episode,
for the main discussion,
we will be discussing book to film adaptations. We'll unravel the complexities involved in adapting beloved novels, epic sagas, and gripping memoirs into visually stunning movies that capture the hearts and imaginations of audiences worldwide.
So to kick this episode off, we wanted to go through a list of some of the most notable book and film adaptations and give us some thoughts on the adaptations as well as some interesting facts.
So we do have a list of movies here, or books here, that were adapted into movies, and I thought it would be interesting to see what, like, the facts or behind the scenes of what happened, because I always find that interesting. Like,
me too. I like watching the documentaries.
You know what I used to like watching? The features on the DVD.
Yeah,
like
featurettes.
the featurettes. Especially,
I'm still a huge fan of those because it's just like some of the things that you didn't think were such a big deal were like huge as far as the production went. Like I recently saw the one for Alice in Wonderland because I love the costumes in that one. I'm talking about the Johnny Depp or Tim Burton adaptation was starring Johnny Depp and Anne Hathaway. I loved their costumes so much. I was kind of wondering what they pulled from. So it was kind of cool to see the little featurette on it. And I was like, how did they make her? Like, I was wondering if they put a prosthetic on her, on Helen Bonham Carter when she did the Red Queen, or if they just did it in post.
Oh.
And it was a mix of both. So that was interesting.
Nice. All right. So we're going to start this list off with The Lord of the Rings.
What?
Now, I'll be the first to admit, I tried reading the books, but it was I don't know, maybe I should try again, because I always want to keep trying books that I know are popular or very well known. And I know they're really good books. And I've read the first one maybe up to when they get to that elf town.
Which, I can't remember the name of it.
I know. Riven. I swear people are hating me for this. They're like, it's Rivendell.
And what's sad is I've seen it and I'm like, what is... And I've read the books and I'm like, what was the name? But it's been years.
For me, like, for the movies, I at least watched them, like, all three every year. The last time I watched it was New Year's Eve, like, all three.
I've read all the books in college, not in high school. I did it in college. But my freshman year, because I had just moved out and I was alone a lot. Mm-hmm. And I had plenty of time on my hands in between work and school because, again, I was alone. I was living with Robert, but he was working overnight shifts, so I was by myself a lot at night, and we didn't have cable. So I loved the books. I tore through them in, like, a semester.
Yeah?
Yeah, but I loved them. I loved the movies, too, but there's a lot that they have to allude to, and they can't spell out the way they did in the book.
I know in the movies they have the extended edition where they put in all the deleted scenes and extends the movie to like almost 4 hours.
Ooh, maybe I'll rewatch it with the extended scenes to see if it's closer.
Maybe, because they do put a lot of other information.
I do think they translated it well. As far as capturing the essence of the books, I think that they translated it very well. But there was just so much more in like complexities in this world that weren't represented in the movie. But I don't think you could ever do that.
Yeah, and I mean the movies were very well adapted, like with the director they had and the cast. I felt like they actually put heart into it, and of course you're not going to have every single...
And they respected it. They respected the work, the written word that was influenced on it.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your interesting facts about The Lord of the Rings?
So I found 3, and the one that caught my eye was that Sean Connery was offered the role of Gandalf, but turned it down because he didn't understand the script.
When I read it, I laughed, but then like when I thought about it, I get it. Because if you weren't prepared for what you were going to see or prepared for what you were going to read, I can understand it because it's like a whole new world. Like everything is reinvented. Like humans are a subspecies in that world.
Right? I just couldn't imagine Sean Connery as Gandalf.
Me either. I think the casting choice that they picked for him in the actual film was spot on. You know what annoyed me was a lot of people kept getting him and Dumbledore confused.
Right? And I'm like, they're not the same actor. They're not. I mean, they look alike because the long beard and they're wizards, but...
Or how people who watch the movie would get Saruman and... Sauron and... I'm pronouncing it weird because...
Saruman? Like the
rain wizard, the one who was going up against Gandalf. They were getting him confused too. And I was like, they're different people. But that's kind of their fault because their names are very similar. Like a lot of the names sounded very similar when pronounced. It was different when you read the book because you could obviously see it was different. But that was one thing I have to like, maybe they could have like given him an accent or something.
Well, they already had accents.
No, I mean like giving him an accent in the film a little bit more like dramatic or something. Like the way they pronounced it just made it sound a little more pronounced.
Got it. All right, next fact. Women in beards were used as extras during the Riders of Rohan scene.
They do what they got to do, Abby.
Hey, at first I thought they were men.
Okay. Me too.
But, you know, they pulled it off.
They nailed it.
And this one's a fact that, like, I feel like everyone knows who's a huge Lord of the Rings fan, but Viggo Mortensen, the actor who played Aragorn, he actually broke 2 of his toes when kicking a helmet during that scene where he finds those orcs, like a pile of burned orcs.
Yeah.
Like, he actually broke his toe, and he was in pain during that scene, and they just kept it.
Well, it worked.
It worked.
It worked for the scene. The next one is Abby's all-time favorite, so I'm just going to let her take it.
Oh, my. So, it is the Harry Potter series, and whatever your view is on J.K. Rowling, because I know
she's very controversial.
She's controversial now, especially with her views. She did write a great series, although there's some problematic things in there as well, but it was one of my favorite books growing up. It's actually, I think, one of the first chapter books I've read as a kid. And you know, when you read your first chapter book, you're like, oh my God, I could read anything now. And that's what it did for me. So, and I just kept reading until
now.
Until it ended with the Deathly Hallows.
Yeah.
So, let me try.
I've only read the first 4, maybe 5.
Oh, I was a huge fan. I always got the books when they would come out and I would read them.
Yeah, I think I only read the first 5. My mom was a huge fan and would buy the books, but they are very dense.
Yeah, they are.
So I think that's as far as I got before I was like, I'm tapped out. I would just I'll wait for the movie.
Yeah, I think for me, I guess because they were close to my age.
Yeah.
And I always like, man, it would be so cool to go to a magical school where you didn't have to do math. And you could learn how to like do magic to do shit for you. Like, that was cool.
Now, I agree that the books and the movies were amazing. It's just I kind of tapped out after the 4th or 5th book.
Mm.
They weren't my favorite.
Oh, they were mine.
I love the whole universe.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't one of my favorite reads. So what are your interesting facts about it? I'll take the next one.
Okay, well, it's like 150 facts. I'm not going to read all 150. I'm going to choose the ones that...
Like 3.
Let me see. It's a lot of facts. Okay, I'm just going to go with the first one I see. Steven Spielberg famously passed on the project, stating that the success of the books made it an open goal. Other directors considered included Rob Reiner and Ivan Reitman. I don't know what he directed. But,
me either.
Rowling's personal favorite candidate was Terry Gilliam, who later criticized the pedestrian nature of the films. The only one I know is still Steven Spielberg. Maybe Rob Reiner, but I don't know what he directed.
Didn't he do Rush Hour?
Didn't he?
I think he did Rush Hour.
I think he did the first one.
I think he did the third one too. I think. Let me look.
I think there's another one here. I'm pretty sure it's going to come up in the list, but I didn't want to tell you about it, that Robin Williams wanted to play Hagrid.
Aww.
But they were so set on only casting British actors.
Yeah.
So
I think that just played more true to the actual novel. Rob Reiner did The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, All in the Family, Misery, and A Few Good Men is just a couple of the other ones he's done. I really liked A Few Good Men. That was a good one.
Yeah. I think the director who directed the first and second one, Chris Columbus, he did Home Alone. And the reason why I know this is because, okay, I love Home Alone as a Christmas movie. And you know the beginning song? It sounds a lot like the Harry Potter theme song. Like, in the beginning.
So it got you hooked.
Well, I'm just saying, it's like, it has similar sounds. And like,
I'm going to have to go back and watch it now.
Yeah, watch Home Alone. I think in the beginning, they have the music going. And it kind of sounds like the Harry Potter theme song until it
changes key.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go back and look at it.
At least that's me. What else? Maggie Smith, the one who played Professor McGonagall, she was battling cancer during the filming of the 6th installment and was able to reprise her role wearing a wig while undergoing chemotherapy during all that.
Oh, I didn't know that. And
Yeah.
I love her. I loved her in the whole series.
Yeah. Thankfully, she made a recovery. She's still alive and kicking right now.
What?
Mm-hmm.
That's a G right there.
I know. I loved her.
Yeah,
I loved her as Professor. Yeah.
Yes, she embodied what I thought of her in my head as the character when I read the book. The same with Professor Snape's casting.
I know.
I love him. I've loved him since Die Hard.
Honestly, I didn't even know because I didn't watch Die Hard growing up.
Oh God, this is skip on.
Oh my God. Okay, my dad. I don't know. My dad watched it, but I didn't see. But it was like, oh no.
If anyone out there who else doesn't know, this is Alan Rickman. He's a god.
Now I know. Now I know who he is, and he played Hans Gruber on Die Hard. Like, yes. I know.
I'm gonna Hans Gruber your ass one of these days. I'm gonna break into your house.
Let's see.
Do you want me to go on the next one?
Do you think that's it?
Yeah, we did 3.
Yeah, that's cool. We could go to the next one. We can stop talking about Harry Potter. We'll save it for another time when we do like the Harry Potter series or something. Not read the books because I know it's a lot.
We could reread a couple of them.
Okay, you go.
So the next book to film adaptation that we wanted to talk about was The Hunger Games by Susan Collins. I love The Hunger Games.
I love them too. I remember buying the first one when it came out, and I just liked the premise of like kids being selected or being like in a random drawing to go fight to the death.
Yeah. I liked the concept of them being so sad and depressed while this is happening and other people being like having a different perspective.
Yeah. Guys, we are drinking right now. I just let you know.
So I hiccuped all weird and then like I scared myself and I just stared at the mic.
So if we're slurring our words,
we apologize.
Yeah, or hiccuping. We apologize. But anyways, on to the Hunger Games. Can I say an unpopular opinion? Or I don't know if it's unpopular, but
shoot.
I really didn't like the casting of Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss Everdeen.
When I watched the movies the first time, I loved it before I read the books. After I read the books, I agree. I was more than a little disappointed in her portrayal.
Yeah, because I read the books before the movies came out, and in my mind, I picture Katniss Everdeen as younger. Like, I know Jennifer Lawrence was young, but she was in her 20s at that time. Mm-hmm. And she looks like a 20-year-old or someone close to 20, not someone who's 15, 16.
Yeah.
And I mean...
And I felt like there was a certain
I mean, she's a great actor.
Yeah.
No shade to her, but
I felt like when I read the book, I had this idea of Katniss of being a little more harsh but softer.
Mhm.
And I felt like Jennifer's portrayal was super harsh of her. And I wasn't getting any kind of give on the softness until maybe the second movie, when the whole thing with Peeta, when he was he hit that fence and got electrocuted.
Oh, yeah.
That scene I thought she did really well to match the book. But I felt like there should have been little hints of that in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt a little too robotic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That was just my criticism of it, because I did love the novels when they came out, or after I read them. And I recently went back and rewatched the movies, and there's just certain things I felt like didn't translate as well as they could have.
Mm-hmm. And also, like, I just don't think Josh Hutcherson, the one who played Peeta, was the perfect choice either.
Me either.
Because he doesn't look well as a blonde, I'll be honest.
No. And I don't know. Other people had to say he was this great person. It wasn't, you couldn't see it through. You know what I mean? Like, that's another thing I didn't like about his portrayal either. Their movie adaptation is not my favorite on this one. I think the Harry Potter films are done way better as far as casting and just the script itself going. But the books, I feel, they're shorter reads, so it'll be easier for people to digest. And they're just so, like, I couldn't stop their page turners for me.
Yeah.
So my facts for this one, my interesting facts. The first one is, the concept for the Hunger Games was inspired by a reality TV and the Iraq War. I didn't know that.
I think I read that when I was first reading the book, because I usually do this thing where if like a book really hooks me, I do more research on it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a series. So yeah, the author actually was inspired because back in the early 2000s, there was a lot of reality TV.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Iraq War happened in 2003?
Yeah, a lot of propaganda.
Yeah, so everything was televised, even the violence.
Mm-hmm.
So I could understand.
Yeah, now that I read that interesting fact, it makes sense given the context of the way the book portrayed the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely makes sense to me. Jennifer Lawrence was asked to lose weight for the role, but she refused because she didn't want young girls to be exposed to a character who was unattainably thin. She didn't seem that big to me to begin with. So the thought of her being even skinnier actually kind of would have made sense in the context of the book because they were starving.
Yeah, because they actually had to, how should I say it? Because they got their ration cards by putting into the Hunger Games, right?
Yeah, they would get a certain amount automatically, but if they wanted more, they would have to put their name in even more. I think they referenced that specifically in the first book when Gale was talking about how many times his name was being put in there, because he would put his name in for his whole family. Mm-hmm. So it could have been a little more real. Just saying, Jennifer.
Yeah, but it just brings up to that point, like when women lose weight for roles, it's like unhealthy, but when men do it, it's like brave. Because they're...
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a topic for another time.
And my last one was David Henry, the older brother from Wizards of Waverly Place, was in the final running for the role as Gale. I think he would have made an interesting Peeta.
I don't see it.
Put blonde hair on him.
I'm trying to.
I don't know. I just think it would have been a little more like light, just given his role on Wizard of Waverly Place.
But also Peeta was known to have like broad shoulders and arms, like stock. He was supposed to be stocky because he threw
flour and stuff and worked at the bakery.
Yeah.
But still scrawny in a way, because his other brothers and everybody else was more... I don't know. Those are a couple of interesting little facts there. The next one, I'll go ahead and do this one because Abby is not a real big fan of the book or the adaptation.
I'm sorry. I just like never got into it.
Abby is a teacher, a English teacher.
Okay, first of all, I teach middle school, not high school. Okay, my kids are never going to read this book.
While they're with you anyways.
Yeah.
The Great Gatsby, which we're going to talk specifically about the 2013 adaptation starring actors Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire. I found the book when I read it to be extremely dry.
I think that's what turned me off. Yeah, and also because it was high school.
Yeah, and we were forced to read it. It wasn't my favorite read. Also, the assignments that they built around it weren't very inspiring. It was just write a paper about this book, which, of course, doesn't make it very...
Who did you read it with? What teacher?
Perry?
She was... Okay, I didn't have Perry. Had Mr. Vocali. Do you remember?
Nope, I didn't have him.
Oh, yeah. Anyways.
But it wasn't one of my favorites, for sure.
Maybe
the movie was amazing.
The movie?
Mostly because I like the opulence of it.
Did you watch the older version or the...
I watched parts of the older version in Perry's class after we read the book, but I didn't get to see a whole lot of it because the TV stopped working. But the Leonardo DiCaprio one, I'm a huge Leo fan. What's up? And I love him. So I went ahead and watched his film version of it. And I liked how bright and colorful the film was. And like his portrayal of Gatsby resonated more with me because it was kind of like you could see his desire for her the entire time. And it was kind of like romanticizing it more than I felt the book did. So I really liked his portrayal in that one. So as my fun little facts here, on the first day of shooting, director Baz Luhrmann filled the scene where Jay Gatsby, Nick Carraway, and Daisy Buchanan have a tea during a rainstorm. Since it was a beautiful spring day, the director had to use 100,000 liters of water to create the downpour scene in the film. Why not just animate it in?
Because it wouldn't look realistic?
I know, but like, not everything in the film looked that realistic, to be honest with you.
Well, I don't know. Maybe because, rain could symbolize sadness and depression. So maybe they actually did it.
They needed it for like aesthetic purposes.
I mean, have you seen rain put in as CGI? It doesn't look really good.
No. Well, I just don't like wasting water.
Well.
The next little fun fact was actors Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire have been real life friends since childhood. I didn't actually know that.
I think I don't know. I know I've heard of it. I just don't know what movies they were in together or if they were in movies together.
I didn't know that they were that close of friends, to be honest. So the last interesting fact was a photograph of Zelda Fitzgerald, the wife of author F. Scott Fitzgerald, could be seen hanging on the wall of the apartment that Tom shares with Myrtle. I found that interesting because the whole premise of the book kind of was supposed to represent his love with her. So that's kind of interesting that they put her picture in the home of the mistress. But yeah, that was an interesting little couple tidbits there.
All right.
Gone Girl.
Okay, I've never read the book or seen the movie.
Oh my God.
Okay, I know it's one of those books and movies I have to see, but because I've heard about it so much and I know what happens at the end, I don't want to. I know the premise behind it and I know what happens. It's just...
Yeah, I might kill it for you. But honestly, I watched the movie first and then I read the book and it still was rather impactful for me. I really liked it. The author is really good. I would highly, highly recommend the Audible version on this one because the book is written in half of Nick's perspective and half of Amy's perspective. So I felt like they had two different voice actors do the Audible. I felt like that really helped add to
the atmosphere, the
tone. And I really, really loved it. And you get a deeper sense of Amy's character in the book than you did in the movie because obviously the bulk of the movie focuses on Nick's perspective. And the book is kind of more evenly balanced. So, and I love a good murder mystery. So I was hooked. I loved it. And I was actually disappointed when they cast Ben Affleck. But then when I watched it, I was actually surprised at how much I loved it. And I love, I think her name is Rosamund Pike.
Rosamund Pike.
I love her. She's gorgeous.
She is gorgeous. Okay. I forgot what I was going to say after this, but anyways. Interesting facts about the film Gone Girl. Let's see which one. I'm going to go with the first one. Brad Pitt, John Hamm, and even Seth Rogen were considered to play Nick.
Why Seth Rogen?
It's beyond me. I always, when I read about these facts with, potential casting, and I hear, an actor's name, I'm like, why would they cast him in this role? It doesn't make sense. I think it's just, they consider it. They don't actually.
Yeah. I actually really like the idea of Brad Pitt or John Hamm doing it.
I think maybe John Hamm.
He's got that darker edge look to him. I think that would work.
Let's see.
The filmmakers falsely claimed that they changed the story's ending.
I don't know what the original. ending was.
The endings match both book and film, so I don't want to ruin it for anybody. So just FYI, they both match. Like,
all right, let me find one other one that's interesting. In the story that inspired Gone Girl, the husband actually did murder his wife.
wow, I didn't know. Oh, this was based on the Lacey Peterson case.
Oh, I forgot that's what... I know I read that somewhere.
That does make sense now, because I'm very familiar with the Lacey Peterson and Scott Peterson. There is a rabbit hole of information on the interwebs about this case. I don't know if he did it or not.
I think he did. I'm just gonna...
There was a couple things that didn't make sense in some of the, depending on where you read your information.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why some of them are really good at convincing you that he possibly didn't, just based on certain pieces of information that they used at trial.
All right. Next one.
Next book to film added.
Which we actually did an episode on.
Oh, yeah, we can do this one.
Yeah. To Kill a Mockingbird.
What?
And I know we've already, talked at length about it. But let's see what's there. Maybe there's something interesting that we didn't know. Oh, Gregory Peck's 9-minute summation speech in To Kill a Mockingbird was nailed in only one take.
Well, he nailed that shit. He was never going to do that better than what he did. He nailed it.
Let's see.
I did want to note that there's some scenes that you're going to see in the book that were not portrayed, or in the movie that were not portrayed in the book, because the book was told in Scout's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So you just heard about it later, the conversation that Atticus had with the sheriff and the judge. You hear about those later. So there is certain instances in the book that, because there was limitations on being in Scout's perspective, because she only was exposed to so much as a child, that they try to fill in with the book. And I think that's what took the movie over the top.
Here's another interesting fact. The watch used in the film was a prop, but Harper Lee gave Gregory Peck her father's watch after the film was completed.
Mm.
And he wore it at the Academy Awards.
Oh,
I know, that's so sweet.
And he embodied Atticus, so I get it. I get why she did it, girl.
Let me see another one. Philip Alford, who played Jem, had trouble eating certain foods for years after, particularly bacon and eggs, as they had to eat their food repeatedly until they got the scenes right.
Damn. I would be down.
You would eat bacon and egg repeatedly?
Maybe not bacon and egg.
Maybe pizza. Oh, not even pizza. Maybe as a kid, pizza would be awesome.
Yeah.
As an adult, no.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on my mood that day.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was 3?
I think so.
Okay.
Do you want to pick 2 and I'll pick 2 more?
For which one?
Off the list? That's of what's left.
What do you mean what's left?
I pick 2 more adaptations and I'll pick 2 more.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay.
Do you want to take over the next one?
Okay.
Okay.
My favorite book, The Shining, is on this list. It is based on the Stephen King horror novel, and it was directed by Stanley Kubrick. I have the same gripe that all the book purists have about this movie. Jack Nicholson was poor casting. I loved the movie on its own, but in comparison to the book, no. In the book, you see a man, he's a fully recovered alcoholic, who is trying to pull his shit together to take care of his family, who has a plan, who is working towards a goal, whose wife trusts him because he earned her trust back, who then you see slowly over time dip into madness once exposed to that environment in the hotel. In the movie, he looks like he's going to lose his shit from scene 1. Jack Nicholson just has this about him where it's a zany creepiness to him that I just don't think, and if you're going off the book the book itself,
mm-hmm.
played into that very well. It wasn't a slow dip into.
It was a process. It was.
Yeah, it was almost instantly he lost his shit. And in the book, it takes a while for the house to get hold of him. And he's really a dedicated father, and he tries really hard to rebuild his connection with his son. So I don't think that translated very well into the script or into the casting choice.
Got it. Did you like Dr. Sleep?
Yes, I did, surprisingly.
I didn't read the book, but I did like the movie.
The book was a lot more graphic
mm-hmm.
as far as the attack scenes and things like that.
Yeah.
than the movie did. I remember when I went to go see the film with my husband, and he was watching the first scene where they were hurting that little boy.
Yeah.
He was visibly uncomfortable. Like, he was, like, looking around, like, he was very confused.
I watched that on the plane. Like, I think it was coming back from Korea. And I was like, oh my God, I hope no one's watching this with me. And it was a dark plane too, so.
Creepy. Just that scene. Like,
I think it is unsettling because you're seeing something happen to a kid that we don't want to experience, so.
The book, way more intense than the film. And there was multiple scenes in the book. It wasn't just the one. And I think that was done tastefully because you only really needed one in the movie to make a real strong impact. And if you did it right, you didn't need to do it again. And I think that's what they did really well. But in the book, of course, they're building a whole different world. So it was a little more drawn out than it was in the film. But it was very interesting. I really did like it.
All right.
I'll just move on to my next one.
Okay.
The last one is another one of my personal favorites, Pride and Prejudice.
I don't like Pride and Prejudice.
I loved it.
I have a thing with Jane Austen novels. Like, I'll attempt to read them, but I don't know what it is about them that turns me off necessarily. Like, I'm still trying to figure that out.
It's a trope. It's nothing.
Probably.
There's nothing unique about the stories. I'm not trying to be effed up, but it's the truth. It's your standard Cinderella story. There's no meat to it. And there are certain parts where I don't even like Elizabeth, the main protagonist, but in the context of it all together, I love it because it is the trope Cinderella story or the token Cinderella story.
Like, I understand where the story is going.
There's nothing different or unique about now at this point, there's nothing different or unique about it. But I loved it. I loved the adaptation with Keira Knightley. All of the adaptations, in my opinion, are really, really good. The only one I haven't seen because of how long it is the one that came on BBC or the British.
BBC?
I think it is BBC, right? With Colin Firth. He plays Mr. Darcy in that one.
Oh.
They go legit straight up book story on that one from what I heard. And one of my favorite scenes is when he tells her he loves her finally. Not the first time. The first time he's like, I love you, but I don't want to love you, but I do, so let's get married. But when he actually lets his guard down and expresses to her how much he loves her at the end of the movie, that famous little speech he gives about have you bewitched me both body and soul, and I love you, or whatever, that isn't actually in the book. That was specifically written for the movie to be more impactful because honestly, the book proposal was kind of flat for me. But I agreed with that change to it, and I think it made the movie way better. And I just love the costumes of that period. Okay,
my turn. I'm going to talk about Memoirs of a Geisha.
Sing it, sister. Preach.
Because I remember I didn't read this book, and I didn't know it was a book until you gave it to me, I think as a graduation gift. Do you remember? You gave me the book.
Possibly. I bought a lot of copies of that book and gave them away.
Okay, you probably gave me one of those copies then. And I read it. And have always been fascinated with, Asian culture and, geishas. It's this mysterious aspect of Japanese culture that I was fascinated with. So I read the book and it was really good. And then I saw the movie and I loved the movie. But what kind of threw me off, and what I later found out, it was just certain things, the glamorization of, the virginity aspect of a geisha, how much of that is myth. I'm pretty sure back then, before the 1940s, it was a thing, but, they kind of stopped that. And that's what I didn't like. I also didn't like the fact that, because, back then, I'm not thinking about the gender of the author, but as I'm older, it's more of men writing women, especially Asian women, and not really understanding the culture that kind of throws me off. The story, the plot line, it's good. The actors who did the movie was good. They were good. It's just, I don't know. I kind of have a different perspective now.
I wasn't so hung up on the semantics of it, I guess you could say. I as an adult, I read this the first time in high school. I watched the movie in high school. When I rediscovered this, when I was unpacking my book boxes and I read it again, my opinion of Sayuri changed. The first time I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is such an amazing story about her overcoming so much and like all the struggle she had to get to her love. Then as an adult, I'm like, bitch, be grateful. Like what's his, I can't even remember his name. She called him Mr. Lizard, Nobu. The way the disdain for him, like as an adult now, I'm disgusted by it because he never treated her like a geisha.
He treated her like at least somewhat of a human.
Yes. And he's the one who came and found her when the war broke out and made sure she was safe. Not even her beloved chairman did that for her. And then her just repulsion of him and what the extent that she took it to get him to stop wanting to come after her. I understand that it's her life and it's what she wanted, but I don't know. It's just, I lost my empathy for her character. Rereading it as an adult and understanding how much he had done for her and how much it didn't matter.
Yeah, maybe I should reread the books.
It's an interesting book. I think if you could read it 100 times and come up with a different ending or a different answer to the end. The Gong Li, her casting as Hatsumomo, spot on. She was gorgeous in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
You should look her up. She was she was the world's most beautiful woman for a few years.
Yeah, she's very beautiful.
Gorgeous.
I also like Michelle Yeoh, but I just love her as an actress.
Me too. Crouching Tiger, homie.
Yeah. I just love her. All right.
Last one.
I'm going to talk about The Color Purple. Because, again, that's one of my favorite books.
And they're coming out with a new one.
The movie?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You showed me.
Yep.
Because I like the movie directed by Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, it was bomb.
And I know they're coming out with another one with, I don't know, I think Fantasia.
Yeah, and
Taraji P. Henson as Shug Avery.
I know, I'm excited to see her as Shug.
I am curious, so I probably might watch it because I know they're basing it off of the musical, right? Because they made a musical.
Yeah, they did.
So they're basing it off of that rather than
the book?
Or
I don't know.
Because I know they're, of course, both were from the book, but I think they're changing it up to be different than the movie.
I would like it if they were to go closer to the novel because there was a lot that was in there. Like Mr. wasn't, granted, he was an ass.
Yeah.
He was a total asshole. But there was a lot that he did for her near the end to get her reunited with her sister that was kind of glossed over in the movie adaptation of it. The same with a lot that he did in the background to try to get better accommodations for Sophia when she was in jail. That, like him trying to get, what was her name? The one his son was having an affair with. Squeak. His organizing that for Squeak to get in there to try to make, I don't know, a plea on her behalf.
Oh, okay.
Like there was a lot more to his character that was kind of glossed over. And I'd like to see a little bit more of that nuance in a newer adaptation.
I don't know if it's just because of the climate that we are currently in. But like when it comes to, you know, abusive men, like especially being portrayed in media, I guess we don't want to, or directors don't want it to be multifaceted because we don't want to see, well, you have this man who's abusive and he's a piece of shit, right? Like abusive men are pieces of shit.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be glamorized or something you should like hold on par with other men. But when you show other aspects of them, like maybe helping people, it may cause some kind of, it'll definitely have a discussion.
I get what you mean. I think that there's a lot of spoon feeding that happens in film that isn't necessarily done in books. And I just think because books, you have to read at a certain education level to be able to read certain novels. So that they would, I don't think they do it so that you could understand the nuances. I just think that the way the book is written is meant for someone who can understand things at a different level.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I like a little more color.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So now we'll move into our actual fishbowl discussion.
Well, I mean, I felt like we had a pretty good discussion, but we could go into other things.
Just a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like general questions about book and film adaptations. Okay, so what are the key challenges in adapting a book to the big screen while maintaining its essence and satisfying fans of the original work?
That's a good question. Because you definitely want to honor the source material and be true to it and as faithful as you can. I think You need a good director who's willing, to make sacrifices on behalf of the actual source material, and a good cast.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of things, because books to film, you cannot have clearly everything in there.
Yeah.
And you're not going to please everyone.
No, never.
So it's just making those decisions. Like, I'm not a film director or anything, so I don't know anything about Hollywood and what the logistics of doing that. But as someone who consumes that type of media, I just want to see a faithful adaptation of it, and faithful to the characters, and not bring anything additional that doesn't contribute to the story.
You're a purist.
Yes. Like, I don't mind changes as long as it's true to the story.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I think what first one comes to my mind is the recent It adaptation. I've read the It novel many, many times. I know I'm averse to the Harry Potter denseness, but I've read It like I don't know how many times. The first movie of the new adaptation, I loved it. It wasn't exactly spot with the book, especially the scene with Beverly being taken. That was never in the original novel. However, what was in the original novel needed to be changed because it was pretty sexual.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. I've read about. I didn't read that part, but I've heard of it.
That would not have translated well on screen. It didn't even really translate that well in the book, to be totally honest with you. I get why he did it after hearing interviews of him talking about it and discussing it. I think they did much better by just doing the pricking their fingers and exchanging blood. That made more sense to me in the context of a film versus a book. And I felt like that was more respectful, and it still stuck with the novel. It wasn't as much history as I would have liked about the town wasn't sprinkled in, but again, there has to make certain concessions when you're translating it. However, the second movie went completely off course from the novel, and I hated it. I did not care for it. I was so excited with some of the casting choices, but the script to me was garbage.
Mm.
So I think that you're right about the vibe and the essence of it still needs to be represented even when you're changing things.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least the intent of the scene should have stayed the same.
All right, next question. Can you share an example of a book to film adaptation that you believe successfully captured the spirit of the original work, and what elements made it successful? Or we could talk about one that did not meet your expectations, or did not actually capture the spirit of the book.
Well, one that I can think of that did capture it just by looking at my bookshelf, I felt Interview with the Vampire was pretty close to the novel. And I think that it kept the spirit of it through, obviously, the main storyline stuck very closely to the novel. The casting choices were amazing. I loved Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt as Lestat and Louis. I felt like they did those roles very, very well. Kristen Dunst, goddess in that movie. I loved it. And I felt like you could feel the underlining into, like, so for instance, with Brad Pitt's character, you could see in his face what he was thinking without saying it. I think that there was a lot in that novel that has to do with their inner dialogue, because that's how the novel was told, in the perspective of like their inner thoughts during situations. And I felt like he, as an actor, was able to represent that in his portrayal of Louis, so that you understood what things appalled him and what things he didn't like, and what, where his mind was going. And I felt like that was such a big part of the novel that it translated really well over to the film. Have you ever read both of them?
I've never. Another book I may have to read.
If you return it, you can borrow it.
Well, I have these books that I'm trying to go through right now, and I still have a pile of books that I've been meaning to read.
They're a little dirty, I'm going to be honest.
I don't mind dirty.
No, I'm for our viewers.
Oh, for the viewers. Okay, I thought you were talking about me.
Dirty. No, I know you and I don't care, but like for the viewers out there, it's a little dirty. And she made a whole universe. There's a bunch of spin-off books based on this book. It's good. I liked it. So which one did you think did not capture the book very well?
I'll wait till you're done.
Okay, go.
Cat in the Hat.
Okay, I agree. Love the movie, but it did not capture the spirit of the book
it
at
did not.
all. And I believe the Dr. Seuss's wife, who gave away the rights to go ahead and do it, was so upset with the final product that she was pulling her endorsements of other live version adaptations of the novels.
I did not know that, but it makes total sense, and I will do the same.
She was in love with the Jim Carrey version. She thought that the How the Grinch Stole Christmas came out amazing, and she loved it. And that's the only reason why she agreed to do the Cat in the Hat. But she was so disappointed with the final product that she started pulling. I don't think she gave the go ahead for any more live action versions.
Yeah.
Of his work.
Because I think after that, any other Dr. Seuss books were animated, like the Lorax.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of another book that didn't meet my expectations.
I know it's a weird one, but Flowers in the Attic, the V.C. Andrews novel, to me, that needs to be a mini-series. There's so much that needs to go into it because the book itself is like maybe this like couple inches thick, but it goes over the course of a few years. It's not like one summer.
Got it.
It's a few years where they're stuck in that attic. So you need to see like the progression. Like I want to see a drastic change from them as children to when they leave 4 years later. Like I want to see body changes. I want to see like height. I want to see all of it. And I don't think that there was a recent Lifetime movie adaptation of it, garbage. I loved the casting of, I think her name's Heather Graham.
Yeah.
I loved her casting as their mother. I thought that was nailed perfectly. But I think the script needed to be better and the other acting choices and actors needed to be better. And her novels are uncomfortable. Like some of the sexual relationships in them are big age discrepancies and things like that. And there's a lot of manipulation. And Catherine, the main character, she uses her body a lot as currency in certain situations. And I think people just have to get over that when you're taking it to a film adaptation, because I felt like with the movies, they always dance around that aspect of it because she was young. They don't want to make that part of it, but maybe just age her up a little bit when you do the film adaptation, because I think those are also very important to her character. I think a lot of her character, because it's an uncomfortable discussion that's being brought up by her character, is glazed over, and I think that's why those movies will continue to fail.
Yeah. See, what else?
You want me to go to another question?
Yeah, go ahead. I have nothing else to contribute to that question.
How does the visual medium of film enhance or restrict storytelling compared to books? What are the unique advantages and limitations that filmmakers face when adapting literature?
I think, in my opinion, I guess it's obvious, like, you can't have everything in a movie
that you could in a book.
Yeah.
The time constraint, because you don't really have it to worry about time.
Also, because depending on how the book is written, you really don't know the inner thoughts of a character. So they have to actually show you how they're feeling rather than just reading their internal dialogue.
Yeah. I also think the constraints about, like, what you can visually even accomplish. You know, there's like, especially with these sci-fi novels, I think that's why it's so difficult to adapt them, because you have to create something from scratch. And when you're reading a book, like, parts of it are in your own mind that you're just filling in. In a film, you have to do the whole shabam. I
think when you mentioned that, what comes to mind, have you seen the Dune movie?
No.
That's a sci-fi book. And I tried reading it before the movie came out. Really didn't understand what was going on. Then I saw the movie, which was good. Like, visually it was good. The actors were good. Then I read the book again. And I do like what they did with it, because they were able to accomplish because it was, well, they did adapt it in films like in the 80s, but it wasn't, I don't know.
I mean, they were limited to what technology was available in the 80s.
Yeah, they were limited with the technology, and it's just because of the environment of the book and the setting. It's kind of hard to create that in visual format.
Yeah.
But they did really well with it. Looking forward to part 2 that's coming out soon.
And that's the recent adaptation, right? Not the 80s one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so last question.
How do you think audience familiarity with the source material affects their perception and enjoyment of film adaptations? Does it vary depending on whether someone has read the book or not?
I think it does. It depends on if they read the book or not in certain instances, because I can fill in gaps that in the movie that make it make sense. Because I think they rely on some things to just be universally known, and they don't put it in the book, in the film, because they just expect everybody to kind of know. That can make it a little confusing for people who don't know. I know that just because I'm a big reader and Robert's not. So sometimes when we watch a movie that I've read the novel for, and I'm like, oh, this makes sense because of this in the background. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm getting it. What about you?
I do think so. But I also, again, think like being a book reader, you kind of had high expectations of how you want the movie adapted because you imagine it being a certain way in your mind. So, I mean, for a non-book reader, it really doesn't matter because
this is the first time
they're being exposed to that
material, yeah.
But for me, I guess that's kind of what I focus on.
I get all into my head with casting and stuff like that, and when it's not cast perfectly, I get really irritated.
Like the Hunger Games, as we've mentioned.
You know which one I thought was cast really well, but the screenplay in certain spots left a lot to be desired was another Stephen King novel called The Outsider. They turned it into a series on HBO or Hulu or something. I think that casting was perfect for everybody who was cast in that miniseries. I just felt like they do what King does, and they build up such a really strong series, and they kind of blew it in the last couple episodes.
Oh, yeah. I know I've seen it, but I didn't read the book, so I did have nothing to compare it to.
And the book's kind of funny. I have the same criticism everybody else does of, even though I love Stephen King novels, it's just he creates the monster that's so compelling and interesting and strong. He supercharges his monsters, and then you can't defeat him. So you got to do something stupid. Like how they bullied him to death in chapter 2. I'm sorry. I was laughing the whole time that scene was happening.
It's like they could have done that when they were kids. They didn't think about it.
To bully it. And I was like, okay.
All right.
Well, this is a fun little discussion about our books to films and thoughts on them.
Yeah, I really like this discussion. I definitely had fun with this one.
Yeah, we're both really big into film and books. So that was a fun little discussion.
Yeah.
So our next read for next month is Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. Abby and I have already kind of started diving into it. What are your first impressions of the novel?
I like it, but I guess it is a nonfiction book. And I really do like how the author creates, Chicago in 1830s and that type of atmosphere and the writing itself. I like certain parts and I don't. And I guess we'll talk about that when we have our discussion. Into it. Yeah.
For a nonfiction, because I'm a big nonfiction reader, I think it's very beautifully written.
It is beautifully written.
Yes. Compared to some of the other ones I've read before in the past, this one is a very nice tone, nice pacing.
And it's not dry.
Yes, for sure. And even things that you would think are a little mundane, he adds a little something to it, which I really enjoy his writing style. I think when I finish the book, if I still feel this optimistic about it, I might go back and see what other books he's written to kind of get a little more flavor for it. I did listen to a little bit of the Audible, and one of my favorite voice actors did the Audible for this one. He also did the Audible for Jurassic Park. I think I talked to you a little bit about this before.
Who's this voice actor?
Let me look. I don't remember his name.
Is it someone I know?
No.
Oh.
He's not unless you're big on Audible books.
Oh, yeah, probably. I'm not.
Give me un momento, por favor. Scott Brick.
Yeah, I have no idea who he is.
He has a good chunk of work that he's done on Audible, and I really like the way he speaks, and his voice is one of my favorites. So I think that's also adding to my experience. One of my favorite readers is reading it to me.
Okay. Well, if you do want to read along with us, highly recommend checking out this book, Devil in the White City.
We're going to do a deep dive discussion on it at our next episode.
Yeah, a deep dive, and that episode will premiere
August 23rd.
August 23rd?
Oh, August 2nd. I'm so sorry.
August 2nd?
Yes.
Okay, August 2nd, everyone.
So thanks so much for reading with us.
Yes, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Eat the Bookworm. We hope you've enjoyed our literary discussion. If you've found our podcast engaging and informative, we kindly ask you to show your support. Please take a moment to hit the like button, leave a comment, sharing your thoughts and recommendations, and most importantly, subscribe to our podcast. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode and will stay updated on all our exciting book reviews and literary discussions.
We value your feedback and love hearing from our listeners. Your comments and suggestions help us tailor our content to meet your interests and keep the literary discussion going. So whether you have a favorite book you'd like us to feature or a book-related topic for us to discuss or comment on, we'd love to hear about it.
So let's grow our libraries together. So hit the subscribe button, like, comment, and join our community and fellow bookworms on Facebook.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Eat the Bookworm.
Yes.
Happy reading. Bye.
Bye.